Do you believe that one moment, one look, one choice can completely change the direction of your life? What if the person meant for you was walking the same path all along? You just didn't see them yet? Today's story is about two strangers, each carrying quiet pain, who meet where love is least expected, and yet exactly where it's meant to be. So put on your headphones, settle in, because this is the love chapter, and it's about to begin. It was just past noon when the diner bell rang. Samantha Reed wiped her hands on a faded apron and glanced up from the cash register, expecting one of the regulars, maybe old Mr. Colby and his gruff request for the usual, or Daisy and her loud toddlers. Instead, a man walked in who looked like he'd taken a wrong turn out of a magazine shoot. Tall, sharp suit, hair that had clearly seen the touch of a very expensive barber, but it was his eyes that made her pause, blue like the ocean on a stormy day. Intense, searching. He didn't look like he belonged in the sleepy town of Riverbend, definitely not in a diner that served $2 pancakes and world-famous coffee with questionable taste. "Table for one?" she asked, forcing a polite smile. He nodded, speaking only when he reached the corner booth. "Please, somewhere quiet." Samantha arched a brow. "Everything's quiet around here, but I'll see what I can do." She handed him a menu and tried not to stare. The man was clearly used to turning heads. He didn't even flinch at the sideways glances from the few other patrons. But there was something about him. Something tired, worn. Maybe it was just another business type passing through. They came and went sometimes, chasing land deals or escaping city noise. She shouldn't care. She didn't need any more distractions. Not when her 3-year-old was due home from daycare in 3 hours. By the time she returned with his coffee, he was still staring at the same page of the menu like he wasn't really reading it. "Let me guess," she said, setting down the cup. "You're not here for the food?" He looked up slowly, as if startled to be pulled from whatever storm brewed behind those eyes. "Is it that obvious?" Samantha chuckled. "You've been reading the breakfast menu for 10 minutes. We stopped serving waffles at 11. He smirked, just slightly. "I'll have whatever you recommend." "Brave," she said. "Most people don't trust the waitress in a town they've never heard of." "I'm not most people." The way he said it made her stomach tighten. Not in a bad way. There was confidence in his voice, but not arrogance, like someone who'd lost something and wasn't sure if he'd ever find it again. She scribbled down his order and turned away, but not before he added, "You have a daughter, don't you?" Her hand froze. Slowly, she turned back. "Excuse me?" He motioned subtly to her wrist. The bracelet. A small silver charm, engraved with a name. Lila. "Lila," he said softly. "Pretty name." Samantha exhaled slowly. "You're observant." He shrugged. "I notice things." She didn't like how that made her feel. Exposed, seen. No one ever asked about Lila. People in town still whispered behind her back, still judged her for raising a child alone at 22. "What brings you to Riverbend?" she asked, suddenly on guard. He hesitated, then gave her a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just passing through?" "Right." Just like they all said. His name, she learned later that afternoon, was Nathan Hale. The name felt oddly familiar, though she couldn't place why. Maybe from the news. A vague memory stirred of a tech company or scandal. Something distant. But that was ridiculous. What would someone like that be doing in Riverbend? When her shift ended, Samantha gathered her things and pulled her coat tighter. The air was crisp, April just starting to warm the earth, but the wind still bit through fabric and skin alike. As she stepped outside, she saw him again, Nathan, leaning against a black SUV. "You walk to work?" he asked, his voice low and casual. "Every day," she said cautiously. "It's a small town. I'll give you a ride." She laughed once. "Yeah, no thanks. That's how horror stories start." He raised his hands. "Fair enough. Sorry." I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Samantha studied him. There was no arrogance in his stance, no slick charm, just sincerity. And that same exhaustion in his eyes, like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. Still, she shook her head. "Good night, Mr. Hale," and she walked away. At home, Lila greeted her with wide eyes and messy hair, arms flung around Samantha's legs like she hadn't seen her in days. "Mommy, I drew a puppy today, wanna see?" Samantha laughed, the tension easing from her shoulders. "Of course, baby." As she hung up her coat, her thoughts strayed back to Nathan. His question, his eyes. Why did she get the feeling that he hadn't walked into the diner by accident? That night, after Lila fell asleep with her stuffed bear tucked under her arm, Samantha sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. She opened her phone, typed Nathan Hale into a search engine, and froze. There he was, billionaire CEO of Hale Tech. Went off the radar a year ago after a major company shakeup. No sightings, no press, no statements, and now, out of all places, he'd shown up in Riverbend. She felt a chill run down her spine. What did he want? And why did she have this terrible feeling that whatever it was had everything to do with her? Rain pattered against the roof like soft fingers tapping secrets onto the tin. Morning in Riverbend was usually quiet, especially after a stormy night. But this one felt heavier, like the sky still hadn't decided whether to cry or hold it in. Samantha stood by the diner window, drying mugs with a faded cloth. Her eyes weren't really on the road, but her mind was far away. Back to last night, to him, Nathan Hale. The name still felt unreal in her mouth, like saying it would summon something dangerous or unexplainable. She hadn't told anyone, not even Sarah, her best friend and co-worker, who usually pried every secret out of her like a safecracker with patience. Because this one didn't feel like gossip. It felt like the beginning of something she didn't know how to handle. Nathan wasn't there when the doors opened at 7 a.m., and part of her was glad. Another part? Restless. She told herself it was because she wanted answers. But the truth had more to do with the way he'd looked at her. Like he already knew something she hadn't said out loud in years. The bell jingled around 10, and there he was. Same suit, same ocean blue stare, but his expression was softer, almost hesitant. He took the same booth, and this time he spoke first. "You Googled me," he said without looking up. Samantha's mouth twitched. "Maybe. And now you're wondering what the hell a man like me is doing in a place like this?" "I figured you were lost," she replied, placing a cup of coffee in front of him. "Or running." He met her gaze. "Smart girl." A beat passed. Neither of them blinked. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "Funny, that's usually what people say before they cause it." Nathan chuckled. It wasn't forced. For a second, he looked almost young, like the man behind the money and scandal and whispers. "You're sharper than I expected." "I get that a lot," she said, folding her arms. "But it doesn't answer the question." He glanced at his coffee, then out the window, then back at her. "I came here to find someone." Her breath caught, but she kept her face still. "And let me guess. This someone happens to live in Riverbend, works too many shifts, and has a 3-year-old daughter." Nathan didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. Samantha stared at it. Her hands itched, but she didn't reach for it. "What's that?" "A letter. One I wrote 3 years ago. To you." Her knees went weak. She leaned on the table without meaning to. "You... what?" "I didn't send it. I was too much of a coward." The silence that followed was deafening. All she could hear was her own heart slamming against her ribs like it wanted out. "Why now?" she whispered. He exhaled. "Because I deserve to know. About her." Samantha stiffened. The room spun. That one word, her, Felt like someone had dragged her through every year of fear and guilt and survival in one breath. I don't know what you think you know. Lila is mine. It wasn't a question, and she didn't have a denial ready, because she'd always known this moment could come. And still, she'd never been ready. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. Nathan's jaw clenched. "Since I saw the bracelet." Samantha swallowed. "Then you know why I didn't tell you." "No," he said, voice low. "No, Sam, I don't." And just like that, Sam, the name from another life, her resolve cracked. 3.5 years ago, Samantha Reed was living a very different life. College student, bookworm, interning at Hale Tech, and foolish enough to fall for the boss's charming, brilliant son. They'd kept it quiet, whispers in hallways, long looks in elevators, hands brushing during meetings. It had been whirlwind, intense, and over far too soon. When she found out she was pregnant, he was already gone, off to Europe, dealing with some family crisis she never fully understood. She wrote him once, twice, then stopped. When no reply came, she figured the message was clear, and she wasn't going to beg. Not for help, not for love, especially not from someone who had 1,000 more important things than her in his life. Samantha sank into the booth opposite Nathan, suddenly too tired to pretend anymore. "I didn't want to trap you," she said. "I didn't think you would." "Then why didn't you write back?" His brows furrowed. "I never got your letters." Her laugh was bitter. "Of course not." "No, I mean it." He leaned forward, voice urgent. "Sam, my father, he had people screen everything. He didn't approve of you. I found out later. Much later." Her throat tightened. "So this is all just one big miscommunication?" He looked at her, eyes softening. It's one big mistake. Mine. For leaving without saying goodbye. For not fighting harder to stay in touch." He pushed the letter toward her. Samantha didn't touch it. "I don't need your apologies," she said. "And Lila doesn't need a part-time father swooping in out of guilt. That's not why I'm here." "Then why?" Nathan's jaw clenched again, this time in pain, real pain. "I missed 3 years," he said, his voice cracking. 3 birthdays, first steps, first words. I'll never get those back, but I want to try, if you'll let me." Her eyes burned. She stood up too fast. The motion startled him. "You can't just walk into our lives and ask for a redo." "I'm not asking for a redo," he said quietly. "I'm asking for a chance." The next few days were a blur. Nathan didn't leave town. He showed up again the next morning, and the next. Not always at the diner, sometimes near the park or walking the same grocery aisle with a sheepish nod. He didn't push, didn't beg. He just stayed. Lila met him for the first time 5 days later. They were at the bookstore. Samantha had taken her there for a new picture book, trying to distract them both. And Nathan, whether by accident or fate, was already there. Lila liked him instantly. Of course she did. He made silly faces, read her the dragon story in 5 different voices, called her Princess of the Peanut Butter Planet, and made her giggle until her curls bounced. Samantha watched from the doorway, her heart tangled in 100 directions. She couldn't stop what was happening. Not anymore. But maybe she didn't want to. That night, she opened the letter. She read it twice, 3 times. Inside were lines she'd never heard, truths he'd never had the courage to say, regrets, hopes, a promise that he hadn't forgotten her, even when the world demanded he move on. And at the bottom, a simple postscript. "If you ever forgive me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving you were right to." Tears slipped down her cheeks. Because for the first time in 3 years, someone wanted to stay. The next morning dawned golden and quiet, casting soft rays over Rosefield's sleepy streets. Ellie stirred awake to the sounds of birdsong outside the window, stretching under the covers as if hoping to stay in that dreamlike moment just a little longer. but reality crept in like a shadow. Her encounter with Nathan last night played on loop in her mind. And it wasn't just the kiss. It was the way he'd looked at her, like he was searching for something she wasn't sure she could give. She sat up and glanced across the small room where her son, Jamie, was still fast asleep, his face peaceful and innocent. The secret she carried, the truth about his father, pressed on her chest like a weight. She had built her life around keeping Jamie safe. But now, Nathan was back, and he was asking questions. Ellie tiptoed downstairs and made coffee, trying to shake the unease. Just as she sat down with her mug, a knock came at the door. Her heart skipped. Please, not him. Not already. But it was Grace holding a brown bag of croissants from the bakery and wearing that look, the one she only pulled out when she smelled drama. So, Grace said, letting herself in like she always did, I heard a certain tall, broody stranger was seen leaving the garden last night. Ellie groaned. This town has the memory of an elephant and the privacy of a goldfish bowl. Spill, Grace demanded, setting the bag down and crossing her arms. Was it really Nathaniel Blake? Like the Nathaniel Blake? Ellie nodded slowly. It was him, and yes, he knows who I am, and yes, he asked about Jamie. Grace's eyes widened, her smile fading. Wait, you mean he suspects? I don't know, Ellie whispered. He didn't say it directly, but I could see it in his face. He's trying to put it together. Grace sat down across from her, voice gentler now. Elle, what are you going to do? I honestly don't know. Before either could say more, Jamie came padding down the stairs, rubbing his eyes and smiling sleepily. He looked so much like Nathan in that moment, it made Ellie's stomach turn. Grace gave her a loaded look, but changed the subject. They spent the morning walking around the village with Jamie, trying to act normal. But all the while, Ellie could feel the storm gathering on the horizon. Meanwhile, Nathan leaned against the stone railing of the inn's small balcony, nursing his own cup of black coffee and watching the world below with narrowed eyes. He'd spent half the night replaying Ellie's reactions, that flash of panic in her eyes when he mentioned children, her hesitation, the way she physically stepped between him and Jamie. Jamie. The boy had Nathan's eyes. That couldn't be coincidence. He didn't want to believe Ellie could have kept something that huge from him. But what if she had? He took a deep breath and called his assistant, Caleb, who answered instantly. Morning, boss. Still in Rosefield? Yes. Listen, I need you to do something. Discreetly. Caleb, used to Nathan's mysterious tone, didn't flinch. What do you need? I want everything you can find on Ellie Saunders. Medical records, employment history, anything from 6 years ago, especially in London. There was a pause. You think she's hiding something? I think she had a child right after we broke up, Nathan said flatly. And I think he might be mine. Another pause. Understood. I'll get back to you soon. Nathan ended the call and exhaled slowly. This wasn't how he wanted to find out, through research and background checks. But he needed the truth. Ellie was obviously scared, and that could mean 1,000 things. Maybe she was protecting Jamie. Or maybe she didn't want Nathan in his life at all. But if the boy was his... Nathan clenched his fists. He wasn't walking away this time. That afternoon, Ellie took Jamie to the park. The fresh air helped, and watching him race across the grass, giggling as he chased butterflies, gave her a few moments of calm. But then she saw Nathan. He was standing under the old oak tree at the edge of the park, watching them. Her heart sank. Jamie hadn't noticed him, too engrossed in building a stick fort with another child. Ellie walked over slowly, every step weighted. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. Nathan didn't look away from Jamie. I had to see him again. Why? She asked, heart pounding. To confirm what you already suspect? Nathan turned to her. Ellie, if he's mine, I deserve to know. Ellie looked down, struggling. "It's not that simple." "It is to me," he said, voice low but intense. "You should have told me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You don't understand. When I found out, you were already gone. You'd changed your number. I didn't even know where to find you." Nathan blinked, stunned. "I didn't change my number. You never tried." "I was scared," Ellie admitted, her voice cracking. "You were building an empire. I was a nobody waitress. I didn't think you'd want the complication. I was just trying to protect him." They stood in silence, the weight of 6 years heavy in the air. "I would have wanted him," Nathan said at last. "I still do." Ellie looked up at him, and for a moment, something softened between them. "I need time," she said. "You'll have it," Nathan replied, "but I'm not going anywhere." That evening, back at the inn, Nathan got a message from Caleb. A file with a single scanned form. A birth record, Jamie Saunders. Mother, Eleanor Saunders. Father. The space was blank. Nathan stared at it for a long time. No father listed, but that didn't mean he wasn't the father, just that she hadn't named him. That was answer enough. Ellie lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, Jamie sleeping beside her. Her heart felt pulled in 2 directions. One part still loved Nathan, maybe always had. But the other part, the mother, was terrified of what this meant. What if Nathan wanted custody? What if Jamie grew up resenting her for keeping him from his father? But even deeper, beyond all the fear and confusion, was a truth Ellie could no longer ignore. She didn't want to keep Jamie and Nathan apart anymore. Not out of guilt, not out of fear, but because, in the quiet moments between anger and heartbreak, she still believed that love, real love, might deserve a second chance. The old stone villa basked in golden sunlight, its vines curling over the terracotta roof tiles like nature's own embroidery. As the day wore on, thick lavender-scented air filled the rooms, and the garden echoed with lazy buzzing from sleepy bees. Yet inside, a storm brewed quietly beneath the surface. Sophia stood by the window in her room, her arms folded tight across her chest. She had barely spoken a word to Damien since the night before. She had questions, so many questions. But every time she tried to form them into words, her throat closed up. Damien, for his part, gave her space. Too much space. He'd left after breakfast to meet with someone in the village, something about the vineyard's export contracts. But Sophia suspected it was more than that. She could feel his nerves like static in the air. They were both dancing around something bigger than them. Late that evening, she found herself wandering toward the courtyard, drawn by the soft notes of piano music drifting through the open archways. The old grand piano in the library had been silent since her arrival, but tonight, someone played it with slow, soulful intent. She peeked in. Damien sat alone, his sleeves rolled up, fingers gliding over ivory keys with quiet elegance. The sight tugged something deep in her. For a moment, she simply watched him. So controlled in public, always measured, but here, in solitude, he looked real. When the last note faded into silence, she cleared her throat. "Didn't know you could play." Damien looked up, startled, but then gave a small smile. "You didn't ask." Sophia stepped inside. "Seems like there's a lot I haven't asked." He nodded once, standing up. "And a lot I haven't told." An awkward pause stretched between them. Then Damien spoke again, voice low. "Why did you really come here, Sophia?" She blinked. "You invited me." "Yes. But you could have ignored the letter. You could have kept your distance. Why didn't you?" Sophia hesitated. She wasn't sure herself. "I guess I wanted answers, not just about you, about the boy you left behind. My son." Damien's jaw tightened. "I didn't know about him. If I had, I would have told you. she interrupted. "If I knew where to find you. But you disappeared, Damien. One day you were just gone. No goodbye, no explanation." His expression shifted, guilt flashing across his face. "I didn't leave because I wanted to. My father forced my hand. He threatened to cut me off completely unless I agreed to take over the business in Paris. I was 23. I didn't have the power to fight him then." Sophia stared at him. "And you couldn't even call, right? I thought it would be easier for you if I stayed away. I thought you'd move on." She laughed bitterly. "Yeah, well, I moved on into single motherhood." Damien's eyes darkened with regret. "Sophia, I'm not trying to justify it. I screwed up. I should have fought harder. But when I found your letter 2 months ago with Luca's picture, it shattered everything I thought I'd buried." Sophia's heart pounded at the mention of Luca's name from his lips. "You saw him?" He nodded. "Not in person, just the photo. He has your eyes, but his jawline, that's mine. There's no doubt." Silence again, and then she whispered, "He deserves to know you." Damien stepped closer, tentative. "And I want to know him, but not just as a distant figure. I want to be there, if you'll let me." Her guard flickered, just for a moment. Then she shook her head. "It's not that simple. He already has a life. And you, Damien, you live in another world. One where people wear $1,000 watches and have vineyards in Italy." He chuckled softly, trying to lighten the mood. "This one's only worth 800. Sophia cracked a reluctant smile, but her tone remained serious. "You know what I mean." He stepped closer still, voice earnest. "Then let me try. Not as a billionaire, not as some polished heir, just as me. The boy who fell in love with you in that dusty university library." Sophia looked at him for a long moment. Her heart wanted to leap into his arms, but her mind still held the reins. "We can start with a conversation about Luca, about us. No promises." Damien exhaled, relieved. "I'll take it." The next few days were spent in an odd dance of proximity and hesitation. They walked the vineyard rows together, spoke over long dinners, and occasionally lapsed into moments of tenderness. His hand brushing hers, a shared smile over coffee. But it wasn't easy. Sophia battled guilt. Was she doing the right thing for her son? Was she falling too fast again? Meanwhile, Damien was learning to navigate fatherhood through stories. Sophia recounting Luca's first words, his stubbornness, his love for trains. One night, Damien handed her a small wooden box. Inside, a tiny model train sat on a velvet cushion. "I bought it yesterday in the village," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You said he likes trains, right?" Sophia swallowed hard. "He'll love it." And in that moment, she saw it. Beneath the billionaire facade, Damien was just a man trying to make up for lost time. One night, while the villa slept under a blanket of stars, Sophia walked onto the rooftop terrace. The moon bathed everything in silver, and she sat alone, watching the countryside stretch endlessly in the dark. She didn't hear Damien until he spoke. "Couldn't sleep either?" She shook her head. "Too much on my mind." He joined her, sitting beside her in silence for a long while. Finally, she whispered, "He asked me once why he didn't have a dad like the other kids." Damien looked down, pain etched deep in his features. "What did you say?" "I told him his dad was somewhere out there, that maybe he was looking for us." His voice cracked. "I was. I just didn't know it." Tears burned the back of her eyes. "You have to earn his trust, Damien, and mine." "I will," he said quietly. "Whatever it takes." They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different, less heavy, like something broken was slowly being pieced together under the starlight. Sophia looked at him, voice softer now. "Do you really think this could work?" He met her eyes. It already is. The morning after the charity gala was unusually quiet. Harper sat on her porch, a blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders, and a cup of coffee resting in her hands. The sun peeked through the clouds lazily, casting a gentle golden hue over the small vineyard she called home. But her thoughts were anything but calm. Everything about that night still buzzed in her mind. The way Julian had looked at her, the magnetic pull between them on the dance floor, the whispered words, and the kiss she hadn't expected and couldn't stop thinking about. But more than the romance, there was something gnawing at her. A feeling, like there was something off, something unsaid. Julian was kind. He listened. He asked about her work, her vineyard, even her late parents. He remembered little details she shared casually weeks ago. But who exactly was he? She picked up her phone and typed his name into a search bar. Nothing. No social media, no articles, no digital trail at all. In this day and age, that was practically a red flag. She closed her phone, unsettled. Meanwhile, Julian stood in front of a mirror in his penthouse suite, tying a silk tie with practiced ease. Across the room, his assistant Marcus tapped away on a tablet. "You're scheduled for a press call at noon. Then the board wants a preliminary review of the third quarter. Should I move the Zurich call to tomorrow?" Julian didn't answer. Marcus glanced up. "You're thinking about her again, aren't you?" Julian looked up at his reflection. His jaw tightened. "I can't keep doing this, Marcus. I can't keep lying to her." "You're not lying. You just haven't told her yet. There's a difference." Julian shook his head. "She thinks I'm just some investor interested in boutique vineyards. She has no idea who I really am. No idea that I could buy every vineyard in this valley, including hers, without blinking." Marcus walked closer, his tone calm. "You're protecting her and yourself. You know what happens the moment she finds out the truth. The press will sniff it out, and she'll become a headline." Julian sat down, his voice low. "But she deserves to choose that. She deserves to know who she's really with." Marcus folded his arms. "Then tell her. But be ready. When you do, things will never be the same." Later that afternoon, Harper stood in her vineyard, hands on her hips as she surveyed the work being done. A new section of vines had just been planted, and the spring rains had left the soil rich and dark. She should have been proud, but she was distracted. The sound of a familiar car approaching made her turn. Julian stepped out, dressed down in jeans and a navy sweater, looking far more relaxed than he had the night before. And yet his face held a different kind of tension now, like he had something heavy to carry. "I figured I'd find you out here," he said, offering a hesitant smile. "Where else would I be?" she replied, wiping her hands on her jeans. They stood there for a moment, the silence between them not quite awkward, but full. "I need to talk to you," Julian said finally. Harper's heart did a flip. "Okay." "Not here," he added quickly. "Can we go somewhere?" She nodded slowly. "Sure. Just let me grab my things." They ended up driving out to a scenic overlook just outside town. A cliffside view that gave way to rolling hills, dotted with olive trees and wildflowers. The wind was cool, and the view stretched on forever. Julian leaned against the hood of the car, arms folded. "This place feels like it exists outside of time," he said quietly. Harper gave him a side glance. "You brought me here to escape time?" "Number, I brought you here because I need to be honest." She didn't reply, only waited. Julian took a deep breath. "My name is Julian Hartwell." Her brows furrowed. "That's your name. I mean all of it. Julian Everett Hartwell." He let the name hang in the air. It clicked slowly in her mind. That name. She knew it, somewhere in a business article or a financial news piece. She turned to face him fully. Julian Everett Hartwell, Chief Executive Officer of Hartwell Ventures, billionaire heir, one of Forbes' most influential under 40. He nodded, silent. "You lied to me." "I didn't lie," he said, stepping forward. "I withheld." She pulled back. "That's the same thing. I wanted you to see me. Me, not the money, not the power, not the name." Harper looked away, her voice trembling. "And when were you going to tell me?" "After I fell for a stranger who never really existed. I'm still the same man you've gotten to know. The man who listened to you talk about your vineyard, who walked the rows with you, who kissed you under the stars." Her chest tightened, but it wasn't real. "It was," he said, taking her hands. "Everything between us was real, except the part I was too scared to share." She pulled her hands away. "Do you even hear yourself? You get to walk away from all of this, go back to your penthouse and your boardrooms. I have roots here. I have people who trust me. I can't afford lies." Julian's face fell. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did." She turned to the view, tears threatening to spill. For a long while, neither of them spoke, just the sound of wind and distant birds. Finally, Harper spoke. "I need time." Julian's voice was soft. "I'll wait. As long as it takes." Back in town, Harper felt like the air itself had changed. People still greeted her the same, but everything felt off. She replayed everything Julian had said, every gesture, every smile, every detail he'd remembered about her, and it was all genuine, except the one thing that wasn't. Her best friend Mel showed up that evening with wine and her usual sass. "Okay, spill. Why do you look like you've been hit by a truck full of emotional damage?" Harper sighed, collapsing onto the couch. "Julian's not who he said he is." Mel's brows rose. "Oh no, is he married? Please tell me he's not married." Harper shook her head. "Number worse. He's rich." Mel blinked. "That's worse? I mean crazy rich, billionaire rich." Mel whistled low. "Well, damn. I knew those sweaters were suspiciously soft." Harper gave a small laugh. Then her face fell again. "He lied, Mel." "He protected himself," Mel corrected. "Would you have treated him the same if he told you on day one?" Harper paused. "Maybe not. But now I don't know what to believe." Mel raised her glass. "Then take your time. Figure out what's real. Just don't run from something because it scares you." Meanwhile, Julian sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights stretching out beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. He held his phone, scrolling through photos of the vineyard, of Harper. He had everything money could buy, except her. And maybe, just maybe, that meant he had nothing at all. The rain had softened to a gentle patter by the time Claire and Ethan reached the old church nestled on the edge of the village. Its stone facade was bathed in the warm glow of antique lanterns hanging under the eaves. The heavy wooden doors creaked open as Ethan pushed them gently, revealing a surprisingly cozy interior with high ceilings, faded murals, and rows of wooden pews. Claire stepped inside, hugging her coat tightly around her. The smell of old wood and melting wax filled the air, mingling with the faint sound of a piano playing from somewhere within. Ethan smiled as he saw her take it all in. "Not what you were expecting, huh?" he asked, brushing a raindrop from her cheek. Claire shook her head slowly. "It's beautiful. I never even knew this was here." "It's one of my favorite places," he said. "Quiet, forgotten by most. Kind of like me." Claire turned to look at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "You're not forgotten, Ethan." He shrugged, running a hand through his still damp hair. "Sometimes it feels like I am. Before all this, before the money, the business, I was just a guy trying to figure life out. Then everything changed so fast." They sat in one of the pews, silence stretching between them. Not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the walls. Claire turned to him after a moment. "Do you miss it? The old life?" He looked at her, and for the first time, didn't hide. "Every day. Not because it was easier, but because it was real. People treated me like a person, not a portfolio. Claire reached over, her fingers finding his. You're still real. The man sitting next to me tonight, taking me to hidden churches and dancing in the rain, that's real. That's more than most people ever show. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world outside the stone walls disappeared. There was only the sound of the rain and the music and the fragile electricity hanging between them. Ethan leaned in slightly hesitant. Claire! She didn't pull away. Yes? I'm scared, he whispered. Of what? That if I kiss you, I won't be able to stop. Claire's heart stuttered. Then don't stop! And he didn't. The kiss was soft at first, tentative. But then it deepened, igniting a fire that had long been quietly smoldering. Ethan's hand cupped her face, and Claire clutched his coat, pulling him closer. It wasn't just passion, it was release, of fears, of loneliness, of secrets. When they finally parted, breathless, Claire rested her forehead against his. What happens now? Ethan smiled, brushing his thumb along her cheek. Now we tell each other the truth. So he did. Ethan told her everything. About who he really was. About his life back in New York, the company he ran, the scandal he was escaping, the media frenzy, the reason he came here. He laid it all bare, half expecting her to walk away. But Claire didn't. Instead, she took his hand, held it tight, and said the words he never thought he'd hear. You're still Ethan, the man who helped me fix a flat tire, who taught me to ride a motorcycle, who danced with me under the stars. That's the man I care about. Ethan closed his eyes, overwhelmed. You have no idea what that means to me. I think I do, she whispered, because I'm scared too. I've been living small for so long, protecting myself from everything, but now I don't want to protect myself from you. They sat there until the candles burned low, speaking softly, fingers intertwined, finding solace in the truth and in each other. Outside, the storm had passed, but inside, something new was just beginning. The morning after their kiss, the village woke slowly under a hazy golden sun. Birds chirped from rooftops, and the scent of dew-covered grass wafted through the open windows of the inn. But inside room 3, where Claire and Ethan had spent half the night talking until sleep pulled them under, the air was heavier. Not with regret, but with questions. And one lingering truth neither of them could ignore. Ethan would eventually have to leave. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a blanket, watching him button his shirt in front of the small mirror. He looked different in the daylight, less mysterious, more vulnerable. Do you have to go back? She asked softly. He paused. Eventually, yes. I didn't come here to stay forever, Claire. I came to disappear. And now I've been found. She nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. By who? By you, he said, turning to her with a small, tired smile. And by me, too. I didn't know I could feel something real again. I thought I was just a headline waiting to happen. But you changed that. Claire wrapped her arms tighter around herself. So that's it? You just vanish again, this time from me? No, Ethan said, kneeling in front of her. I'm not running anymore, but I do have responsibilities, a life that needs sorting out. The company, the board, the lies, she added quietly. His face fell. Yes, and I need to fix it. I need to fix me, but I don't want to do it without you. Her breath caught in her throat. I'm not asking you to pack a suitcase today, Ethan said, but I am asking you to believe in this, in us. I want to come back, and when I do, I want you to be there. Claire searched his face, trying to decipher what was hope and what was fear. And what if life gets in the way? Then we fight for it. I've never had anything worth fighting for, Claire. Until now. She reached for his hand. Then go fix what you need to. But promise me one thing. Anything. Don't disappear. He stood, pulled her into a tight hug and whispered, I won't. Not from you. The next few days passed in a blur. Ethan made arrangements to return to New York, quietly and without fanfare. Claire went back to the library, her days moving like pages turning in a book she wasn't quite ready to read. She didn't tell anyone about Ethan's departure, not even her closest friend Mia, who noticed her quiet mood and gentle sighs. The village, as always, moved at its own pace, oblivious to the heartbreak hidden behind Claire's smiles. And then, just like that, Ethan was gone. No grand goodbye, just a long hug at the train station, a kiss that tasted like autumn rain, and a promise whispered over the sound of the train whistle. Claire stood on the platform long after the train had vanished, the warmth of his hand still lingering in hers. The next few days passed in a blur. Ethan made arrangements to return to New York, quietly and without fanfare. Claire went back to the library, her days moving like pages turning in a book she wasn't quite ready to read. She didn't tell anyone about Ethan's departure, not even her closest friend Mia, who noticed her quiet mood and gentle sighs. The village, as always, moved at its own pace, oblivious to the heartbreak hidden behind Claire's smiles. And then, just like that, Ethan was gone. No grand goodbye, just a long hug at the train station, a kiss that tasted like autumn rain, and a promise whispered over the sound of the train whistle. Claire stood on the platform long after the train had vanished, the warmth of his hand still lingering in hers. The next few days passed in a blur. Ethan made arrangements to return to New York, quietly and without fanfare. Claire went back to the library, her days moving like pages turning in a book she wasn't quite ready to read. She didn't tell anyone about Ethan's departure, not even her closest friend Mia, who noticed her quiet mood and gentle sighs. The village, as always, moved at its own pace, oblivious to the heartbreak hidden behind Claire's smiles. And then, just like that, Ethan was gone. No grand goodbye, just a long hug at the train station, a kiss that tasted like autumn rain, and a promise whispered over the sound of the train whistle. Claire stood on the platform long after the train had vanished, the warmth of his hand still lingering in hers. The next few days passed in a blur. Ethan made arrangements to return to New York, quietly and without fanfare. Claire went back to the library, her days moving like pages turning in a book she wasn't quite ready to read. She didn't tell anyone about Ethan's departure, not even her closest friend Mia, who noticed her quiet mood and gentle sighs. The village, as always, moved at its own pace, oblivious to the heartbreak hidden behind Claire's smiles. And then, just like that, Ethan was gone. No grand goodbye, just a long hug at the train station, a kiss that tasted like autumn rain, and a promise whispered over the sound of the train whistle. Claire stood on the platform long after the train had vanished, the warmth of his hand still lingering in hers. Spring arrived in the village with blooming lilacs and brighter skies. Claire walked through the town square one Saturday morning, a tote bag of books slung over her shoulder, when she saw the commotion. A sleek black car parked near the bakery. People gathered, whispers rose. Then her heart stopped. Because Ethan stepped out of the car. He was different, sharper suit, confident stride, but his eyes scanned the crowd like a man looking for oxygen. And when they landed on her, he smiled. Claire dropped her bag and ran to him. He caught her mid-run, lifting her into a hug so tight it erased the months they'd spent apart. "I told you I'd come back," he whispered against her hair. She pulled back slightly, hands cupping his face. "And I told you not to disappear." "I'm never leaving again," he said. "Unless you're coming with me." She laughed, tears forming. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" "I'm here because I need to ask you something," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. Claire's breath caught, but he paused, then grinned. "Not here, not like this." He grabbed her hand and tugged her gently. "Come with me." They returned to the cliffside path, now painted with blooming wildflowers and birdsong. The bench stood empty, waiting. The sea sparkled below. Ethan led her to it, then turned to face her. "I've made a lot of mistakes," he began. "I ran when I should have stayed. I lied when I should have trusted. But loving you, that was never a mistake. It's the most honest thing I've ever done." He dropped to one knee, pulled out a simple ring, a small sapphire nestled in silver, and looked up at her with all the hope in the world. "Claire Morgan, will you marry me?" Her hands flew to her mouth, then to his shoulders, pulling him up into a kiss before she even spoke the words. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, 100 times yes." The village church was quiet that morning, the early light streaming through the tall stained glass windows in shades of rose and gold. The pews were simple, the altar modest, and yet to Claire, it felt like a palace. She stood near the entrance, bouquet in hand, trying to breathe through the rush of nerves fluttering in her chest. "Still time to run?" Mia teased, adjusting the veil draped delicately over Claire's shoulders. Claire grinned. "You'd tackle me before I reached the door." "Obviously," Mia said, smirking. "You're marrying the hottest billionaire I've ever seen. There's no way I'm letting you screw that up." Claire laughed, the sound catching in her throat. "It still doesn't feel real." Mia squeezed her hand. "That's how you know it's the good kind of magic." Outside, the village had transformed. Locals gathered in the square, dressed in their best, eager to see the event that had become the talk of every cafe and bakery. News of Ethan's return, and their engagement, had spread like wildfire, though no one treated him like a celebrity. In their eyes, he was just the quiet, mysterious man who had fallen for the girl at the library. The church bells began to chime. Claire inhaled deeply. The moment had come. Ethan stood at the altar in a tailored navy suit, a hint of nerves flashing in his eyes. He'd never been afraid of speaking to crowds, of boardrooms filled with ruthless investors. But today, standing in a simple village church waiting for Claire, his palms were sweating. He heard the doors creak open. The crowd stood. And then, there she was. Claire walked toward him, sunlight catching in her hair, the lace of her dress dancing with each step. She looked both radiant and impossibly grounded, like the sun and the sea rolled into one. Ethan forgot how to breathe. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're everything." Claire smiled. "You're late." He blinked, then laughed. "Late?" "To my life," she whispered back, "but worth the wait." The reception was held under a canopy of lights strung between trees in the village square. Lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, and music floated through the air like laughter. Locals brought dishes, pies, stews, fresh bread, and everyone danced on the cobblestones as if the world had paused to celebrate. Ethan kept Claire close all night, their foreheads brushing as they swayed beneath the stars. "Do you ever think about how it started?" he asked. "The train?" Claire asked, her head resting against his chest. "No," Ethan said. "The bookshop." She pulled back slightly, surprised. "The bookshop? I saw you there, weeks before I got up the courage to speak to you. You were reading some old poetry book and your lips were moving like you were tasting the words." Claire blinked. "You're serious?" "I was so mesmerized I bought the same book," he admitted. "I still have it." She shook her head in mock disbelief. "And here, I thought I was the stalker." Ethan laughed. "We were two lonely people circling the same story, Claire, just waiting for the right chapter to begin." As the night wore on, the villagers drifted home. The music quieted, and the stars took over the sky. Ethan and Claire slipped away, hand in hand, back toward the cliffside where so much of their story had been written. They sat on the same bench, the sea now calm beneath them. "I don't want a honeymoon in Paris," Claire said, her head on his shoulder. Ethan turned to her, surprised. "You don't?" "I want this," she said. "The view, the quiet, you." He kissed her forehead. "Then this is our honeymoon. Forever starts here." Months passed. The seasons turned. Claire continued at the library, her love for stories now woven with one of her own. Children gathered for readings where she'd sneak in tales of mysterious strangers on trains and love that grew from silence. Ethan split his time between the village and the city, but more often than not, he was beside Claire, learning to garden, failing at baking, laughing more than he ever had in his life. They never bought a mansion, never threw lavish parties, but they bought a small cottage overlooking the sea, filled it with books and plants and music, and in that space, they built a life. Not perfect, not ordinary, but theirs. Years later, a child with wild curls and bare feet darted down the cliffside path, clutching a red balloon in one hand and a book in the other. "Daddy, Mommy says you promised a story?" Ethan, now with a touch of gray at his temples, looked up from the garden and grinned. "Did she now?" Claire appeared on the porch, a teacup in hand, glowing in the late afternoon sun. "Don't you dare make her wait, Ethan Blake." He stood, scooped the child into his arms, and walked toward the bench that had once held all his doubts and now held only peace. As he opened the book and began to read, Claire watched them, heart full. Because some stories don't need endings, they just need forever. Love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures or fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the softest moments, in a shared silence, a lingering glance, or a goodbye that turns into forever. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments below. Your words matter, and we read everyone. Subscribe to the Love Chapter for more journeys of the heart, and don't forget to ring the bell, because the next story might just be your favorite yet.